Hello. So this is just a little bit of a review from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then we're gonna transition into talking about things that can keep us from learning what it is we need to learn and being successful in school. We're gonna call these barriers to learning. So this is just a review of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. First of all, as you can see at the bottom of the pyramid, we have physiological needs. Physiological needs, again, those are things like food, clothing, shelter, warmth, safety, things like that. I'm sorry, safety is at the second level of the pyramid. Safety is all about whether if you have your bottom needs not being met, then you're not going to feel safe. Love and belonging comes next. Then we have esteem, particularly self-esteem. And then we have, at the top of the pyramid, we have self-actualization. And that's, remember, all about feeling like we have our life together and that we're doing what we need to be doing, not just for ourselves, but for others. We're in a good spot when we have that. Some people really never get to that top level, which is, really sad when you think about it, because a lot of times it means they haven't gotten through all of the bottom levels yet. They haven't learned to love themselves, they haven't been loved by others, or they haven't really had all of their physical and emotional needs being met. So when we think about that, those kinds of things are what prevent people from being successful in school, because they prevent you from having the kinds of maybe supplies that you need. If you are living in poverty, you don't have your physiological needs met, you're coming to school hungry, or they might prevent you from feeling like you can be successful because you have low self-esteem, so you don't even try. There are a lot of different ways that being at a lower level of Maslow's hierarchy can affect you as a student and can make you not have the same opportunities or the same chances that somebody else might have. So the next thing that I want to talk about is barriers to learning. Before we talk about this, I want to make the point to say we're going to talk about a lot of different things here. Not everyone who experiences one of these events is going to respond in the same way. Some people are going to face an obstacle and they're going to be totally devastated by it, and it's going to throw them back really, really far. And then other people might face that same obstacle, and they might just be a little bit more prepared to deal with it. For instance, one of the things we'll talk about is poverty. If you come from a poor family, and then statistically, you might not have the same likelihood of having a good education as somebody else. But if you come from a family that believes in education and that believes in sending you to school and providing you with what you need no matter the cost, then poverty might not be an obstacle for you. The same thing goes if you personally have a really high intelligence or a really high aptitude for certain areas and you really want to pursue that career. Poverty is not going to keep you down in the same way that it would keep somebody down who maybe wasn't as intelligent in that area. So those are, just remember, each person is different in terms of how they respond to the barriers, okay? So the first one we're going to talk about, come on, there we go. Yeah, the first one we're going to talk about is poverty. Tomorrow I'll have a video that you can watch about this, but just for tonight, just know, we talked about Walter Cunningham today in class. Walter Cunningham is his character in To Kill a Mockingbird, who came from a very poor family. And we remember he was kind of the butt of a lot of jokes. Scout made fun of him, and she didn't understand why the teacher tried to treat him nicely and things like that, because to Scout he was just poor. Well, that teacher in that book was trying to help that child overcome poverty in school, and maybe it would have helped if she had, and maybe it wouldn't have. Poverty is the state of being poor. And just to give you some context for this, when we talk about poverty, for a family of four, say there are 4 people in your home, if you make $23,000 a year or less, then you are classified as being below the poverty line. Now, I don't know about you guys, but $23,000 a year does not sound like a lot of money. So even if you're making $30,000 a year for a family of 4, or $35,000, that's still, the struggle can be real even so. So it's, just because you're not below that line doesn't mean you might not deal with some of the same issues. Poverty can be an issue. It can really hit you at a lot of the different levels of Maslow's. It can hit you at the physiological needs. If you're poor enough and your family can't afford healthy food to feed you or clothing to send you to school with warm clothing and comfortable clothing that fits you properly so you can't concentrate. It can also hurt you on other levels too. I know we heard from one student earlier this year who talked about getting made fun of because of the clothes she was wearing. That's that level 3, love and support and belonging, right? And so if you feel like you don't belong with your friends because you're in a different socioeconomic status, then that level 3 need might not be met at that time. Other issues can involve, like if you're from a poor family or from a struggling family, you're more likely to have a single parent household or a household in which both parents have to work to make ends meet, which means some of the things that a person who has a stay-at-home mom maybe would take for granted aren't going to be there. Your parents aren't going to be as likely to be able to help you with homework or to make sure that you get a proper dinner or that you go to bed at a decent hour, or that you even just have an example of things of how to act. And so when they're not in there setting examples, then you might be missing out on that. So that's one of the side effects of poverty. Also, sometimes if parents don't, if you have one of the aspects of poverty that the video will talk about is when a parent doesn't have a lot of education, then that parent, it's more difficult for that parent to help their child get an education because they don't really have the experience to help them. Something like filling out FAFSA. I know I was talking to one of my students about this. If your parents never had to fill out the form to do financial aid for college, then you might have some trouble filling out that form because that you really need your parents to help you with that. And so that could be a barrier to you getting a college education if you don't have somebody to help you fill out that form. Also, people who have learning disabilities and other actual psychological barriers to learning, a lot of times these can be due to physiological and safety needs not being met early on. And so you find that there is a higher percentage of students in poverty who have learning disabilities or who have behavioral disabilities or other kinds of things that make them have to take advantage of special education services in school. Now, this doesn't mean that children in poverty are stupid. In fact, that couldn't be farther from the truth. It's just simply that they don't have a lot of the advantages in early childhood to develop the building blocks that they need to make learning easy. So that we say that they have a disability in their learning styles or in their learning aptitude, but not necessarily in their intellect. So there's a difference there. So just keep that in mind. Also, it's just as simple as not having school supplies or not having clothing to wear, not having a car to get, a class like, talking about a class like Teacher Cadet, if we had a requirement in this class where everyone had to have a car in order to participate, there are a lot of students in this class who couldn't take it. So, poverty can affect transportation, which can impact education as well. People going to Berkeley Middle College, think about them. They're getting a quality education there, but you have to be able to get to that campus in order to go. So that's poverty. I'm going to talk about a couple of other barriers, and then we're going to finish this conversation about barriers tomorrow. The next barrier I want to talk about really quickly, and again, I've got a couple of videos tomorrow, but I want to talk really quickly about teen pregnancy. When we think about Maslow's with teen pregnancy, pregnancy alone can be a barrier to doing a lot of things. Just because pregnancy is hard on a woman's body, a lot of the physiological needs can't be met. I was talking to somebody pregnant earlier this morning who said she was just starving all the time. So if you're hungry all the time, or if you have to go to the potty all the time because you're pregnant and your baby is pressing down on your bladder, those are some physiological needs that we're talking about. But also, when we think about how pregnancy can impact learning, it used to be, not so much anymore, but it used to be there was a serious stigma about teen pregnancy. And if you came to school pregnant, you might get kicked out. Now, nowadays, that's illegal. You cannot be kicked out anymore for being pregnant in school, at least not in a public school. When we're receiving federal money, that's sexist, that's actually sexual discrimination, and it is illegal for that. I mean, it's also illegal to bully people for things like that. That's a form of bullying. But just in general, the stigma, in a lot of ways, I think in some schools, hopefully not here, but in some schools, it can still exist, even though it's not as bad as it used to be. The health issues, again, are, a problem, as we said. Another issue, though, is absences. If you think about it, if you have a child, that's your responsibility now. And you have to go to doctor's appointments with that child. You have to take that child home when it is sick. And you have to, so you might actually miss out on school because of a lot of those added responsibilities. And so when we think about pregnancy among our students, and I've had students who have been pregnant or who have had children, and I can tell you right now, I've had some of my best students that I have ever had have been either pregnant or parents. And so there's nothing to say that those students are not good students, but they are up against some things that the rest of us may not be up against. All right, I think this is the last one. Let me check and see really quickly. Latchkey children, and the next one. Yeah. So latchkey children is the last one I want to talk about really quickly. And again, I have a video to show you tomorrow. A latchkey child, this is an expression that many of you may not be familiar with, but essentially latchkey children are children who are under the latch or under the key of their house, meaning they get home and they have to lock themselves in the house because their parents aren't there to take care of them. So these are kids that are home alone because their parents are out somewhere else. Now, most of the time, this is just not the parents being bad parents and ignoring their children, but this is because their parents don't get off work until 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, and there's nobody there to take care of the kids. Babysitters are expensive, right? And maybe if both parents are working, or if you're in a single parent household, then it's hard to find people to take care of your kids. And so when we think about this, a lot of times, by the way, because this tends to happen a lot in single-parent households, this can also go along with some of the symptoms of poverty. One of which being your parents aren't there. And when you think about what all can a parent do for you as a student to help you be successful in school, I can think of several things that my mother did. First of all, when my mother was there with me, she would sit me down and make me do my homework. She would look at my homework, and she didn't always understand it, but she would help me to talk it out with her if there was something I didn't understand. She would check my backpack to make sure there weren't any forms that I needed to get signed. She had the time when she wasn't working to call my teachers and check in on me. She was able to put a hot dinner on the table for me that she cooked, right? Not always, but when she was home with me, she could do that. She was able to enforce rules around the house, like turning off the TV and making me do my chores, so that I developed a sense of responsibility. So all of these things are things that my mother was able to do, and I did have a single parent household, so she wasn't always able to do this for me, but when she was there, these were the things that she enforced. And so it helped me with my education, so that she was able to do these things for me. And so children who don't have that at home, again, it's not saying that they're bad students or that their parents are bad parents. It's just that they might be missing out on some of these aspects of education that their parents can help them with. And so we have to take that into consideration when we have kids. Even very young children sometimes are left alone at home. Or maybe they're left alone with just an older sibling who doesn't really enforce the rules because they're still really a child themselves. So we have to think about them as, how can we make their lives easier? What can we do to take their latchkey status into consideration? Okay, that's it for this evening's lesson. I hope that you learned something today about different barriers for learning. We're going to talk about more barriers to learning tomorrow in class, and we're going to do an interactive activity with it. So keep that in mind. All right, and have a good evening.